Hello everybody, my name's Dan. I'm from Rewind. Today we're going to talk about resilience for AI-driven SaaS. So why your team's AI agents might be holding you back. We're going to figure out how much we can do in the 50 minutes that were allotted today. So we're going to use a lot of different MCP, buzzwords, agents, and so on to try to figure out exactly what we can do in this 50 minutes. And we'll kind of explain what we're going to try to cover today. So ultimately, we're going to interact with the Atlassian MCP. That's probably what we're going to do the most. We're going to read Jira and Confluence data using Cloud Code. We're going to create a Forge app from scratch. And then Cloud Code is going to read from the Atlassian MCP to build that. So we're not actually going to be typing out any code. We're going to be reading from Jira issues and Confluence pages to kind of construct this Forge app. And then that Forge app, and I'll get into it a little bit more in detail, it's going to kind of give us a sense of what that MCP server is doing. I don't know if anyone else has the same experience, but using these MCPs, they kind of act as a black box. You can't see what's happening under the hood, right? You kind of give it something and you see the result. The goal here is to kind of give you a sense of what it's doing behind the scenes. So this is what we'll build. We're going to take Atlassian data, so Jira and Confluence. We're going to feed it through Cloud Code, and we're going to build a Forge app. That Forge app is going to give us an understanding of what functions are being invoked, right? Read Jira issues, read Confluence pages, create, update, transition. We're going to understand what it has access to, okay? Now, when we understand what it has access to, it's going to prevent over-provisioning. If I give it too much access, I can roll it back. If I want to experiment a little bit more, I can push the boundaries and ultimately stop mistakes before they happen. That's kind of the goal here. We're going to get a little meta, but not this kind of meta. Actually, it's this kind of meta. If you remember this spinning top from Inception, where they kind of go into the layers of dreaming. So bear with me as I kind of explain the journey we're going to take. We're going to use Jira and Confluence and the official Atlassian MCP server and Cloud Code to create our own custom Atlassian MCP server. So we're using Atlassian's MCP server to replace itself. Okay, and the reason we're doing this to replace itself is so that we can make sure that we control every function that it calls. Okay, so that's step one. The first result of our output is going to be a custom MCP server. Now, the requirements for that custom MCP server, I've written all in Jira and Confluence. So Jira has all the user stories of exactly what I want that MCP server to be able to do. Confluence has all the design documents. So again, this is why we're kind of going a little bit meta. I'm using Jira and Confluence to read from it to instruct Cloud Code what to build. The second result that we're going to build is the Forge app that's going to show me exactly what that MCP server is doing. So again, we're going to remove the black box nature of it and turn it a little bit more into something that I can audit, something that I can control a little bit more and have some access to. If this is what you're feeling right now, bear with me. We're going to kind of take this step by step, and it's going to make sense once we actually show it. So without kind of delaying any longer, we'll get into the actual building of it. We'll get started today, and ultimately we're going to start using Claude. So we're going to make sure that we have a connection to the Atlassian MCP server, and we'll get into the Claude function here, and we'll just test out what we have access to. So what MCP servers do I have access to right now? And what I would expect to see here is one of the results is going to be Atlassian amongst other things. And that's exactly what I'm hoping for. So let's get into the actual Atlassian functionality. And it looks like it's the most fully provisioned, which is fantastic. So using the Atlassian MCP server, can you list out maybe the first 5 Jira issues you see in the project with key MCP? And I'll show you what this project looks like shortly, but I just want to make sure that we can actually talk to the MCP or talk to Atlassian using that MCP. So this is going to think for a second and just make note of how long this is thinking. I've always had a gripe with how long these MCP calls take. They seem to take a little bit too long, but that's great. I can see the first 5. That's exactly what I was hoping to see. So we have a connection. We can talk to Atlassian using Cloud Code and the MCP server. Let's make sure that we have access to Confluence. So can you use the Atlassian MCP server to list out 3 pages from the Confluence space titled MCP. So very similarly, I just want to make sure that I can read things because this is what I'm going to feed into Cloud Code once I open the actual coding piece of it to make sure that it follows the instructions that I want it to set. So again, keeping in mind, this isn't the fastest call. I still don't understand why these take so long, but they do. So part of this is going to see if we can speed up these calls, not only get more auditability to it, but if we can accelerate the response. It just reduces the amount of time we're going to spend. So after a few seconds, I should see, here we go, 1, 2, 3. So that's perfect. I have Forge app design, MCP server design, and the API credentials and environment setup. So let's go back into Chrome, and I'll show you exactly what these issues look like. So these are the issues that we're going to use to build out the custom MCP server and the Forge app. So search, fetch, create, update, transition. These are all things that I want to use. And these are the design documents that I need Claude Code to follow. I want to make sure that it understands like the folders, the directories. I want to make sure that it understands not to do too much. So I have like the NPM packages that I want it to follow. All the requirements basically around the tools it's going to use. I don't think we're going to have time for GitHub today, but that's fine. We'll stick with Jira and Confluence. This is going to be the Forge app. So this is going to be designed of that Forge app. So now that I have access, let's exit out of the Claude session and open VS Code. This is where we can actually start it, and I'll resize the window. This is where we can actually start interacting with this, the data and build out something. The first thing we'll build is going to be the MCP server. So just an empty directory right now. I have my environment variables that I'll set up. I'll talk a little bit about those later. And we have our Claude MD file, which is just basically going to keep Claude constrained to what I'm asking it to do. But first, we'll create an empty directory called MCP server. This is going to be where we house the custom MCP that's going to replace the Atlassian MCP. So I'll initialize this. It's going to be empty. And once we open it up here, you'll see there's just a package.json, and I'm going to actually bring over the environment file into it because this is what it's going to rely on to make those API calls. So you see there's a few things we need. I'm actually going to delete this because we're going to populate that on the fly. Our API token, email, Confluence-based URL, Jira-based URL, these are all the things that it's going to use to interact with. So let's start pulling in some NPM packages that we're going to need. There's only 3. So first one is going to be Zod. I don't know if it's ZOD or ZOD, I call it Zod. We're going to use the .env, so npm install .env. And the most important one is going to be the model context protocol / SDK. This is what's going to allow us to talk from Claude to this server. So that's the most important one, but you'll see it's a pretty straightforward setup. There's only 3 external packages that we need for us to accomplish basically replacing the Atlassian MCP. So now that we have these packages scaffolded, we can close everything out here and actually start talking to Claude Code. So here's your first task. I basically want you to build me an MCP server that will replace the default Atlassian MCP server. And I've also given you access to the Atlassian MCP server for this task. I want you to read the user stories from the project with key MCP, which explains the user or the use cases we need to build for, as well as the Confluence space titled MCP, which contains the design documents. So again, we're just giving it access to it. We want to make sure that it understands exactly what I'm asking for, and I'll just specify here that you must follow. I want to give it as much guidelines as possible, and then I give it some encouragement. I'd just like to say go. So the idea here is it's going to recognize that we have an empty MCP server directory. It's going to read from Jira and Confluence and say, okay, well, here are the 36, I think it was, user stories that's describing the functionality. So I understand what he's asking me to do. He's giving me access to the NPM packages. Confluence is describing exactly what the functionality should be from a design perspective, and then Claude's going to take care of the rest. So this is how we have this kind of like self-fulfilling, loop of, Jira explaining how to replace the old MCP server. So this is exactly what's going to happen. And I'll walk through these files here, but we see we have the log server that's being created. We have different folders that are showing up here, which is going to contain tools like the jira.javascript file, and this one's going to be confluence.js, github.js. Again, we won't probably have time for GitHub today. And then it's going to recognize that the package JSON is already existing, so it's just going to reformat it. That's fine. And it should be wrapping up shortly. And we'll walk through what these files look like. But again, I'm not trying to spend a ton of time on coding today. It's really going to show you how you can get away with not coding and actually building something that's useful. So it just kind of told us the MCP server is fully built. It's going to tell us to make sure that the end file is updated, which it is. So let's open up the index. And this is the entry point. So this is the actual MCP server we just created. This is what it looks like. Just briefly, we have our tools here. So all the functions that I asked it to build, like list issues, list pages, spaces, and so on, this is exactly where it's going to define that functionality. So we have list confluence pages and so on. And all this is going to be exposed to our MCP, which means I can talk to Claude Code and get it to take action on these tools. Within here, we have our logger. The logger is actually going to be what's telling me every single API call that I make. It's going to be logged, which I'm then going to host in Forge, but we'll get to that shortly. The logger really is what's going to give me the transparency around that previously black box nature. So if I did everything correctly here, I should be able to change the directory back into and open up or start the server, which you can see is now listening. And I'll just open up a new Claude window and ask it if it can see my new MCP server. So I'll say, do you have access to a MCP server named bitdemo? Because this is what I called it for the purpose of today. And if we did everything correctly, you can see it says, yes, I have access to it. And here's all the functionality that I have access to. So that works. Now let's test it out. We'll use the same function call we did before. So can you list out the first 5 issues in the project with key MCP? Okay, so the same function call that we did before. Now, a reminder, it took about 30 seconds to respond from the Atlassian one. This one thought for 0 seconds, so under a second, and we should see the exact same result if everything works. And there's the first 5 Jira issues. And let's just reconfirm. We have search, fetch, create, update, and transition. So the reason we're getting a little meta here is because those Jira issues that we just displayed here is what inspired Claude Code to build the functionality of the MCP server. So you can see how many layers we are right now. We're probably around layer 2. But let's just make sure, now that we've confirmed that Jira works, we can confirm that Confluence works. So with the same idea, I'm going to ask it to list out the first 5 Confluence pages. So list out the pages in the Confluence space titled MCP. So again, this took about 30 seconds with the previous functionality. So let's see, I'll just give it access. I'll say yes. And again, under a second, we have our 5 Confluence pages. So not only have we replaced the default Atlassian MCP, we've actually made it faster by doing this and kind of bypassing all that thinking that it had to do. So I'll close this because that's kind of covering part 1. So I'll jump back out of that directory, and now we'll shift our focus to the Forge side of things. So again, Forge, I'll just kind of open up the helper here because Forge is a CLI tool that I'll have some sort of create here. Perfect. So if I run Forge create, this is all I need to do to create a Forge app. Now, the great thing about Forge apps is that I don't own any of the infrastructure. So if I give it a space and a name, I'll say MCP control plane. That looks good. I'll say yes. And this is going to be a Jira app with the UI kit and a Jira admin page. This part isn't super useful. All I want basically is one page within my Jira admin that I can show information for. So that's exactly what we just did. But as I was kind of saying, Forge hosts all this for us. So I'm not owning any of the infrastructure. So that's all it takes. MCP control plane has now been created. And you'll notice that we have a new folder called MCP control plane. And this is going to house all the logic and the functionality. It's going to describe everything that we need Atlassian to host for us for the functionality of this app. So if I change directories into that new folder, and I'll just open it up here with the browser instead and close off these files. You see we have a source directory with a front end and a resolvers. The front end is just React. It's just going to show you what the front end sees, and we have hello world. we have an invoke for getText, which is just going to resolve to hello world. So what I would expect to see here is I'm going to Forge deploy. So this is actually going to deploy the app into the cloud. Atlassian's going to host it for us. I'm going to install it onto my Jira environment. And when I open it, I should see hello world and then a loading screen and then hello world again, if all works well. So Forge deploy again, just host this on the Atlassian cloud. Once I finish that, it says successfully deployed. Now I'm going to say Forge install, and I'm going to give it a site name, which is just the name of my testing site. So it's this Atlassian.net. And this usually doesn't take too long, so we should see Jira. I'm going to say yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. And my app should be installed in a matter of seconds. And it says, perfect, successfully installed. So let's just make sure that that connection worked. So what we can do is jump back into Chrome, over to Jira. I'm going to open the apps section, Marketplace Apps. We're going to go on the left-hand side, and I should see something I didn't see before, which is the MCP control plane. Notice it's in development, so that's perfect. It's not in production yet. And here's my hello world. And then after it loads, hello world again. So that's exactly what I just showed you from the React file. This is just the boilerplate, right? This is just template files. This is exactly where we need to start, but we're going to get rid of all this kind of boilerplate stuff and actually get Claude Code to read from my Jira project to build out more functionality. So in the exact same way we prompted it to make sure to read from Jira and Confluence, we'll prompt it to read from the same data set and build out the Forge app this time. So this is kind of our second deliverable that I talked about. The first one was the custom MCP. The second one is going to be this Forge app. Now, the Forge app is going to be just that, it's visual. It's going to host all the MCP calls that we make. So I understand not necessarily what I'm doing, but I could also deploy this so that I can understand what other people in my Jira environment are doing. So that worked. I like to be positive with it, give it some encouragement. Our next task is similar. We want to build a Forge app that is going to, how do I word this? Display the logs that our customer, or that our custom MCP server is making API calls to, or API calls for. Similar to our last task, all the functionality that I want you to build is described as user stories in Jira, or in the Jira project titled MCP. And the design documents in the exact same way for the Forge app are in the MCP Confluence space. Refer to these throughout your coding and design to make sure you are building what I am asking for. Go. Again, I try to be, excuse me, I try to be as specific as possible to make sure it stays on the guardrails. Sometimes I find if it's not, it tries to do too much. These newer models don't behave the same way. They seem to be a little non-deterministic, so if you can give it the most concise instructions possible, like do not go beyond the Confluence documentation, you typically have your best chance at a result. So here it's going to recognize that the Forge app scaffolding already exists. It's going to say, here are the files that I already have. Here are the files that the Confluence and the Jira data describe. And now I'm going to update those files to make sure that it abides to the instructions that were given to me. So it's actually going to change some of the naming. It's going to update the dependencies. So we're bringing in a new NPM package. It's going to create the log receiver. So like I mentioned, the logger file from the MCP is posting to Forge. Forge is ingesting that, and it's going to store it on the key value storage, which I'll touch on. The web trigger is the ingestion engine, so that's what's going to accept these API calls. And then it should update the index.jsx, which is the React file, in order to display these, not only the tools that I have access to, but all of the API calls. And it looks like it may have erred on something. So let's see if it can self-correct. Usually that red means that there's a misformat. And there you go. So it accidentally put a text when it should have been a stack. And it's done. So in a few seconds, we've scaffolded that Forge app. And it's actually, I like this because it gives me instructions on what to do next. It says, Since we brought in new information, we have to do npm install. So I'm pulling down those dependencies. I then have to do a deploy, and then I can do the web trigger. And I actually know from experience, I have to do one extra step, which is going to be the installation. So again, it doesn't know everything. It tries its best. So let's do a Forge deploy. Now, the reason we have to do this deploy is because we added that web trigger. Web trigger is technically new infrastructure. So Forge deploy is going to need to understand that we've added this new function. It's going to provision that on our behalf during this Forge deploy call. And then it's going to understand that that web trigger needs to listen to data, and it's going to give me a URL. So after I do Forge install -- upgrade, it'll give me the chance or the choice to pick what site. I only have one, so it's easy. I'll say yes. I'll say yes again. And in a matter of seconds, there we go, my Forge app is updated. So now I should be able to run Forge web trigger -- create, and it'll give me a URL unless I did something wrong. Oh, there's no -- That's my bad. I should know that. So when I do web trigger create, it's going to give me the chance again to select which one. It's going to be log receiver. So this is the one that's ingesting the data. And there's my URL. So I'll copy that and paste it into my environment variable file. And that environment variable is Forge web trigger. So let's find out who's using this. So who's relying on this. And it should be the logger.js, which is the file responsible for sending information out. So that's exactly what you can see here. Fire and forget to Forge web trigger. So it's using that URL. It's posting that data. Forge is going to take that data, store it, and then display it in a neat way. So here's that log request function. Very straightforward. Again, nothing fancy is happening. It's going to show you the tool that was called, the timestamp, the status, the summary, and the input. So that's the kind of data that we're going to log to make sure that we understand who's using what, why, when, where, and so on. So let's jump back over to, because we made some changes, we'll refresh our app. And again, if all worked well, we should see a fairly updated dashboard. And there we go. Once it loads, here's all the tools that we have available. So the search, get, create, update, delete, transition. And there's also a risk associated to it, which is cool. So I can see like transition is it delete? Delete's very high risk. And then we have Confluence. Again, GitHub's there, but we won't get to it. But my request logs is 0. Which makes sense. I haven't actually done anything to hook this up yet. So that's going to be the next step. I have the Forge app. I have the MCP server. So let's jump back into my VS Code and start up our custom MCP server once again. We're going to make those same list Jira issue calls and then see if my logs get posted into the Forge app. So here we go. I'll open up a new Claude instance. And using the bitdemo MCP server, list out the first 5 issues in my Jira project with key MCP. So this should yield the exact same result. I'm not expecting anything different from a response perspective. It should actually be identical, and we can confirm that it is. And here, MCP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, perfect. What I am expecting is if I come back to Forge, my log requests has 1. And we have Jira search issues. So that's exactly what I was hoping for. Now that I'm making API calls with my new custom MCP, I'm seeing exactly what calls are being made for it to accomplish the task that I gave it. So it's no longer this black box. And the same should apply to Confluence because we did it for both. So can you list me out the pages that exist inside of the Confluence space titled MCP? Again, I am not expecting any different results. This should yield the same 5 pages that we showed you before. The only difference is because it's using that custom MCP, the logs should be posted to the Forge app so that I can see exactly what calls were made in order to produce this result. So here are my 5 pages. I now have 2 request logs, which is fantastic. And it says Confluence list pages. So that's exactly what I'm hoping for. I now have full visibility, but one thing I want to kind of push a bit is create. So can you create issues, or one issue in the project titled MCP with, let's just use dummy data. So dummy text as a description. So far, all we've done is read, so I want to make sure that I can actually write data to it. Can I post new things? Because if I take this into the next level, maybe I want to iterate with Cloud Code and say, write me out the Jira stories that I need, so here we go. It tells me it's successful, so it created a new issue. The logs are showing me that something created an issue successfully. So let's double check in our Jira project. If I scroll all the way down, there's my dummy test issue. And I should have some dummy text in the description. So there we go. Not only can we read, but we can also write to Jira, and we can write to Confluence. So the feedback loop that I can kind of give it is once we've accomplished the first part of it, if I want to expand this functionality, I can come back to it. I could design alongside Cloud Code and kind of build out new Jira tickets. So I'm just going to quickly detour to the Forge console just to show you what this looks like from behind the scenes. But all the logs here are going to show you what the app is actually doing. Looks like we have a few errors, but most of them are just deprecation warnings, which I'm going to ignore for the purpose of today. Anything in production I might take a closer look at, but the key value store is probably the most important piece because this is where we're actually storing all the logs. So if I look at this here, all this data is being stored in the Atlassian key value store. So again, I am not hosting any of this physically. Atlassian has put this all in the cloud, so all the data that we see in my app section when I open the MCP control plane is all hosted by Atlassian. There's nothing that I do from an ownership perspective. All these logs are stored in that key value store, and ultimately they get read from here. There's a ton of improvements I could make from making sure that there's like per customer, per site keys and so on. But ultimately that kind of shows out the proof of what we want to do. We used the Atlassian MCP to read from Jira and Confluence to then again come back in and build out its replacement. So what I like to do is just to kind of wrap up. I saw there's a couple console logs in there, so I like being polite to Claude. I'll say thank you for the work today. That was great. You did a great job. Just in case they take over one day, they'll know that I was nice to them. And I tested everything, and it all worked. Fantastic. I kind of give it some cleanup tasks too, so feel free to go, clean this up and get ready for production. I just don't want to have like console logs left over. It's kind of embarrassing when that happens in your production app and users can see things. So when I just ask it to clean things up, I just mean like go remove all the development debugging stuff that we'd done. So after that, it should be ready to go, unless it's not. Unless it decides to delete my Jira data instead. So this is interesting. Did it actually do this? Oh. Okay. So Jira's gone. Confluence is gone. So this is interesting. This is kind of the nature of agents, right? It was so hooked into the context of Jira, and what did I ask it for exactly? I said, let's clean this up and get ready for production. So it's been so hooked on like Jira Confluence, that my idea was go clean up the code, and it said, absolutely, you're right, let's go clean up Jira and Confluence instead. So like, again, I try to give it as much guardrails as possible, but it did what it thought I asked it to do. So this is a great example of like this non-determined, you hear the word non-deterministic. It basically means you could run 3 of the same prompts and get 3 different results every single time. So it's not perfect, right? You really have to have a guardrail in place. And we had all the right intentions throughout this. We tried to build something that was gonna stop this from happening before it happened. We wanted to know what it had access to. And then my one cleanup prompt is what kind of derailed everything. So again, with all the right intentions, you can still run into these situations that don't often, produce the expected results. So things that you need to take in consideration is, number one, what did I give it access to? And the answer was everything. Now, luckily, everything that I did was being backed up over the course of the last couple of weeks. So I can just jump back into this project and undo those changes that it made in a pretty harmless way to make sure that if I did want to refer back to any of the work that I did to continue on this journey in production, I can just revert the changes back as this kind of undo button in the space. And I'll do the same for Jira and Confluence to make sure that all that data comes back again if I need to reference it back. But again, we thought we were doing everything right, but the nature of these tools is such that we cannot control the outcome. We do our best to make sure that we give it as much information as it needs to be successful, but things like this can still happen. So not only do we want these kind of like provisioning guardrails in place, but having that kind of like undo functionality to recover from when things like this ultimately do happen, it just kind of gives me a little bit more confidence that it can move fast when I do experiment with these things. So again, if I just refresh this, hopefully everything just comes back and looks normal, which it does. Fantastic. So just to make, I want to sanity check that everything looks as expected, and it seems as though it does. So that's great. And again, I can't blame Claude Code for this. This was really my fault for not necessarily being specific enough when I asked it to clean up. It did its best up until that point. So interestingly enough, like when I kind of framed the question about like how much could we do in 50 minutes, we can almost reframe that as what could this agent do in 50 seconds, because it all went south in that last 30 seconds or whatever it took to do that. So I guess the kind of moral today is, I know we're trying to wrap up, is it can do a lot in 50 seconds and it can do even more in 50 minutes. So these mass updates, I gave it access to do that. That's completely on me. I gave it access to every single API. I provisioned the Atlassian API token to have no guardrails. It unintentionally deleted things and it broke references between Jira and Confluence. So these are kind of the risks that we need to kind of keep in mind, is like this thing can fly. This thing can build 2 apps in a matter of 50 minutes, but it can also go the other way and kind of have this self-destructive nature of things like we just saw. That's all from me. Thanks for being here.